Hi, this is Dr. Clayton. Welcome to episode 20 of Hypnosis Chat. Today I'm going to talk about studying and testing, which is one of my favorite topics, and I'm going to give you 3 tips that you can use starting today to help improve your studying and testing. The first tip is related to the zone, what athletes call the zone. And normally when we talk about going into the zone, most people think of athletics, but really the zone applies to any performance activity, and that includes studying and testing. There's something that's called the Yerkes-Dodson law that indicates that for any activity, any performance activity specifically, there is an optimal level of activation. Activation being how energized or relaxed your body is. So for example, if you are a power lifter, you would want a very high level of activation in order to perform the best. On the other hand, if you were a competitive chess player, you would want a somewhat lower level of activation. So, you can imagine on a scale of 1 to 10 where 10 is the highest level of activation, 1 would be the lowest. Powerlifting would be maybe 9 or 10. Chess might be 3 or 4. And studying is probably right there around the 3 or 4 range. Studying and testing would both be there. And the problem is, so it's kind of like a bell curve where if you start going over your optimal level of activation, your performance decreases. And if you're under, it also decreases. So Western societies often tell us, well, study more, study harder. And a lot of times that's like putting a round peg into a square hole. If you don't have the right state, you can study as much as you want and the information is not going to get in. So the first thing you should always do when you're sitting down to either study or take a test is to check your physical state. And am I too hyped? Am I too relaxed? And if so, that's going to mess up your memory intake and output. So what is the right state? What is the right zone state? So the best, and it's a little individual for everyone. So the best way to find out is think right now, take a moment to do this. Think right now of a time that you really felt like you were studying well or testing well. And if you can't think of that, if you can, great. If you can't think of that, think of a time that you were really enjoying a book or really involved in a movie, because it's probably a similar state. So notice how relaxed or energized you were. It probably is around that 3 or 4 level, but kind of get a good kinesthetic feel for what your activation level was. Now, once you get more familiar with that, you'll start to notice if you go even a little bit above that or a little bit below that, and you'll notice your performance dropping off. So certainly it can be helpful to study more, study harder, that sort of thing. But it's kind of like a multiplication. Like if you have 4 times 4, it's 16. 4 times 5 is quite a bit bigger. 4 times 6 is quite a bit bigger. So you've got these 2 sides where you are studying more, but you're also studying more effectively. If you study effectively for only 1 minute, you're not going to get much done. If you could study for 10 hours, but if you're extremely ineffective at your studying, you're not going to get anything done either. So you want to raise both of those numbers up as much as possible. So next time you're studying, stop and think about how you feel. Get a turn inward, notice how you feel. Is this the same state I was in when I was really studying well before? Is this the same state that I'm in when I'm reading a good book, when I'm watching a good movie? If not, take a moment to either relax yourself or maybe get yourself a little bit more energized. Maybe get up and move around if you need to do that. Once you pay attention to your state and start to manage your state, you will find that the other number in the equation is actually much more effective. That other number being how much you're studying. Okay, so that's the first tip. Know what your state is, become aware of it, and then try to make your state as optimal as possible when you're either studying or testing. The second major point is related to the zone but distinct, and that is when you think about studying or testing, you have either boredom, like it seems like a tedious activity, or it seems like a stressful or anxiety-producing activity, then what that's going to do is that's going to move you off of your zone. Even if you know what your zone state is and you feel like you can get there under normal circumstances, boredom or anxiety will move you off of that optimal state. So for example, let's just say that you see let's say you see testing as an anxiety-producing activity. There's basically there's three ways you can think about any activity. You can think about it in a motivating way, in an anxiety-producing way, or in a tedium-producing way. And the two main elements of seeing something in a motivating way is, number one, seeing yourself doing it successfully, and number two, seeing it through all the way to the end. If you do those two things, you'll notice, if you think back to something that you already like doing, something that you already are motivated to do. When you're thinking about it, you're thinking about doing it successfully and thinking about it all the way through. On the other hand, if you think about something that produces anxiety, you probably are not thinking about it all the way through. You're probably thinking about it up to the middle point. You're probably also thinking about some consequence or problem happening. And if you do those things, then it's going to create anxiety and push you off of your optimal state. On the other hand, if you see studying as a tedious activity, you're probably not seeing it as yourself successfully going all the way through it. And if you see it as a problem or a big hurdle, then you're telling your brain that it's going to be tedious and it would be better to just not do that. And it will respond by giving you a sense of boredom that will prevent you from doing it. So the second tip is get in the habit of, whenever you think of studying or testing, get used to thinking about it in a successful way all the way from beginning to end. So for example, if you want to study today, imagine sitting down, studying, going all the way through it, and then finishing and being successful. And that whole thought might only take 3 to 5 seconds, but the fact that you're going all the way through it means that you're communicating to your brain that that's going to be a successful activity. And that is one of the most motivating things for your brain. So you can actually control how your brain feels based on what you imagine. The third major point is, again, related to both studying and testing, and that is that different types of material, whether it's something that you're reading or something that, if you're taking a test, whether it's multiple choice or whatever it is, we have a tendency to have a certain speed that we read and process information, and we use that speed regardless of what the material is. And this is such an unconscious process. People don't realize they're doing this. So if someone's used to reading novels for English class, there's a certain speed you read that out, and it's a little bit quicker than you might read a scientific textbook. So if someone reads a lot, and this is such a deep topic, let's just say that someone does great in English and they love reading novels and they do great on their papers and everything, but they're like, oh no, I'm not good at science. But meanwhile, they're reading their science books as if it's a novel. Completely don't even realize they're doing that. They're totally smart enough to read and understand that science textbook, but because they're completely unconsciously reading it in the wrong way, then information is not getting in there and they think they're dumb. They think they're not a science person. A lot of problems with schooling happens with that problem and other similar unconscious problems. So here's what I want you to do to avoid that problem. Recognize that your most used to style and speed of processing information is not right for every single subject or even every single assignment within that subject. So the first thing you want to do is, just like if you were to meet a new person, you probably wouldn't treat every single person exactly the same way. You'd get to know them a little bit, and maybe this person's a little more, lighthearted, and they tell jokes more. Another person's a little more serious, but they're still a nice person, and you'd probably act a little differently. Part of the idea of a relationship is that you meet someone halfway. You got to meet the book halfway. You got to meet the material halfway. So, and actually, I would even go further and say you don't meet it halfway. You do it its way. You speak its language. So, for example, here's what I want you to do. Next time you are learning something, like you've got some kind of material, I want you to just start reading it and notice what the optimal speed for processing that information is, and go in there with an attitude where you're willing to go at its optimal speed. Now, maybe it is an English novel and it is designed to be read a little bit faster. Maybe it is a very dense anatomy textbook, and it's designed to be read very slowly and carefully and getting every single little piece. And go and find out what speed you can go at where you're processing the information the best. You're doing this for yourself. You're not obviously doing it for the book, but you want to look at the book or whatever the material is and get a feel for how quickly your brain processes the information. And we do this with drinks also. If I have a glass of water and I have a glass of wine, I probably are going to drink them at different speeds. I'm probably going to, savor the wine a little bit more. I'm probably not going to chug the wine. I hope not. And it's the same thing with reading material. You can also think of it like a food processor. So you've got, different ingredients you want to put in the food processor to chop them up or whatever. You can't just shove everything in there at once. And every processor is different. There might be a lower power one, there might be a more industrial one, and you have to get a feel for what the food processor can do so that it can work at its maximum. You are not shoving the food in there at your maximum rate. How quickly can I put the food in there? That makes no sense. It wouldn't work that well. You're going to see how the food processor can work. So I want you to see books and material that way also. So I'm reading this book. I'm going to start reading it. What speed feels the best? What speed allows me to maximally get the information? Don't automatically read it too fast or too slow. Because you can read too slow too. Let's say you're the science person and you're used to reading textbooks slowly and carefully, and then, I hate English class because I have to, the books are so boring. They're so, there's nothing to read in there. You're just reading it like a magazine. And it's because they're reading it the wrong way. You're reading at the wrong speed. So give the books the priority. Give the material a priority. How fast do you want to be consumed? How fast can that information be maximally consumed? When you do that, then you will find that you feel better about it. You process the information much more effectively. And same thing with testing. I mentioned it also applies to testing. So when you're on a test, and you're reading through it, in general, of course, you want to read the testing questions a little bit more carefully because they do tend to be a little bit more dense. But sometimes it might have you, read a long paragraph, and it might be a little different than reading a math formula, which you really want to read very slowly, maybe. So always be aware, the material in front of me has priority. Whatever speed it wants to go at, that's what I'm going to go at, and then you will get the maximum results as a result of doing that. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.